Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, could we please do roll call?
Of course. Chair Carmelo Okendo,
Present.
Vice Chair Member Philip Lantry,
Present.
Member Russell Alexander,
Present.
Member Nanette Douglas,
Present.
Member Don Grigsby,
Present.
and then I have alternate Don Streeter,
Present.
and alternate number 2, Daisy Snyder.
Present.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Okay, can we get approval of the minutes held on March 19th? If everybody's read them and are okay with them?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All passes. First order of new business is ordinance number 2024-28, PUD 23-00005.
Good afternoon, Commission. Tisha Manning, zoning manager. That item will not be heard tonight. We're going to continue that meeting, that item to the next planning commission meeting, which is going to be in May. All right.
Thank you. So then the next order of business would be ordinance number 2024-29, CDA 24-00003.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioners, Dave Tomac with the City Manager's Office. So basically, what we looked at doing is streamlining a couple of processes. You guys went through your land development code reorganization a couple of months ago. So we're taking advantage of looking at specific sections, upgrading them to kind of how we do things now, and taking advantage of some opportunities to streamline things. You know, as the city grows, sometimes the extra steps in the past have not been a big deal, but as the city grows to be more efficient, we're going to try to make administrative things approved by administrative staff and items that need your policy direction and council decision then would come to you, and you'd have a more time to actually spend on them. In this particular ordinance, we're looking at easement vacations and final plats. Easements are required for anything from like drainage, utilities for like your telephone lines, cable, things like that, or for just construction, temporary construction easements. Easements themselves are not real property. They're just restrictions on property. So it's not like we're actually approving any kind of asset. We're just releasing restrictions that were what we consider special purpose. So Jack will correct me if I get too far off the accurate route. So what we're asking you to do tonight is to recommend the ordinance where we would allow the city manager or their designee. You know, so a lot of times if the city manager's not available, you know, be the community development director or I'm the assistant, we could review easements and actually release the restrictions. Like an example, Jack Brack Road is being extended to the east. And they're going to be buying about 4 parcels of land. And those 4 parcels of land all have what we call a standard 5-foot drainage utility easements on them. Well, if you're going to put a road through there, you no longer need that because now you got right-of-way. So instead of taking it through the process and having it go all the way to city council, your city manager would be able to release those easements. And then obviously the new right-of-way would be recorded and it would fit more what's going on. Another one would be, we've got a road project on Neptune where there's some utilities being relocated. In some cases, the utilities were recorded on private property. They're not on the right-of-way. Now that the road's being widened, however, those easements no longer belong in that spot. They're being relocated. Those easements can be vacated, and new easements can be recorded. So a lot of those kinds of things can happen without having to go all the way through to the city council for that decision. Statutes are pretty clear about when you can release easements if there's no public purpose. So it really, there's still guidelines in place to make sure that the staff does it in the proper way. In addition to easement vacations, we also have a process for subdivision plats. Right now, and we're not changing the process, you get a preliminary subdivision plan where they show you kind of the graphic layout of the lots. They show you kind of what kinds of houses they're building or what kind of commercial development can be considered, where access points are, all that kind of stuff. And council approves a preliminary subdivision plan. The next step is to go to a subdivision construction document where the engineers and the surveyors actually lay it all out and they build the infrastructure according to that preliminary approval. If there's any minor changes, those can be adjusted. Any major changes, they would actually have to amend the preliminary subdivision plan. So there's always, if it's not substantially in compliance with the preliminary subdivision plan, they can always amend that and bring it back for approval. If they get through the subdivision construction process, everything's been done in accordance with the preliminary subdivision plan, the final step is what we call a plat, subdivision plat. And that's where you record it with the clerk's office. And again, it's substantially in compliance with that preliminary subdivision plan. And now the subdivision construction plans, which have pretty much kind of put everything in place. Right now, the final subdivision plat goes through your city council. What we're asking for in this ordinance is that your development review committee actually approve the final plat, as long as it's substantially in conformance with the preliminary subdivision plan approval and the statutory requirements. So again, it's pretty much at that point an administrative task. There's no real policy decisions being made other than staff confirming that it's consistent with the preliminary and they've got everything on the plat that's required by the state. They do that anyway before it goes to city council. You just don't have the additional step of taking it to city council for final approval. So other than those two items, this ordinance has a lot of little clerical cleanups. In the past, you've told people to apply to the Department of Planning and Zoning. Well, that department may not exist anymore. It's got a different name. So basically, we got rid of all that, and it's whatever department designated by the city manager. And other little cleanup items like that. We've tried to make sure that it's all consistent with what we do today. I think it's consistent with your strategic plan goals. We're trying to make things efficient. We're trying to ensure good development patterns. We're trying to give you all a chance to breathe when you get a bunch of development so you can focus on policy as opposed to all these other small steps. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We obviously recommend approval. If you have any specific questions or need to discuss something, I'd be happy to answer those questions. I think it is a public hearing, so you might have to take public input from the massive crowd that's come to hear my presentation.
Might take a little while.
Yes.
So do we have any questions for the city?
So is this supposed to greatly improve the turnaround time for it?
Yes, ma'am. So for easement vacations, it actually can save up to 60 days
Oh, okay.
of time, because you have to advertise and get on the council agenda for the easement vacation. This could be approved by the city manager, and then it's just a document prepared by the city attorney that could release it and get recorded in the clerk of the court records.
So the only reason, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
So-
then for the plat, I was just going to say, that extra step actually could save at least 2 months, maybe even 3 months from the time to get that plat recorded, and which allows folks that are investing in the community to move quicker towards building permits and things.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
because cost goes up if time goes up usually.
Yes, ma'am, especially when you're just waiting for a meeting to occur.
Right. And I guess when you had said something about a hearing, but usually the hearing isn't necessary at that point in time any longer.
Right, most
so
plats are on
it's just
consent
more
agenda.
statutory that hearing has to happen because it's written that way. Okay.
Exactly. Most of the final plats are on consent agendas, and so basically, you're just waiting for that thing to be scheduled.
Right.
For easement vacations, it's required, I think, public hearing for the vacate right now, which means it has to be noticed ahead of time, and that adds a little bit more time. So that step would go away.
Okay, I just have to ask a really stupid question. Don't anybody laugh at me. Easement vacations?
I know, it's not a vacation, is it?
I just, I don't know that word. Is
Is
that
there a
word?
technical reason for that term,
I don't-
vacate?
I can't answer that.
It's just the word that it
Yeah,
is.
well, I mean, you're vacating,
Abandoning.
you're basically, yeah, you're
vacating the
you're
ownership.
vacating a
Vacation, such
restriction.
as
Yeah.
vacating it,
Yeah.
control. All right, yeah.
But that's a
Sold. I buy
great
that.
question, because it's certainly not a vacation that I've ever seen, so.
I love the origination of words, so, okay, thanks.
I do agree that the change to the vacating easements should be more streamlined and
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah,
I'm a little bit confused about some of the language in
okay,
the ordinance that's changing, so maybe you could clarify
Sure.
that a little bit.
absolutely.
So I'm looking at, this is the final decision section.
For the subdivisions,
Yes,
So
for the final plat,
so 2.4.6,
E2, I guess?
yes, final decision.
Yes.
And it says approval of the preliminary subdivision plan by the city council shall act as a delegation of authority to the Development Review Committee to approve the final plat in substantial accordance with the approved preliminary subdivision plan. There's, the one exception to that is for minor subdivisions. Minor subdivisions are like 4 lots that don't require like, public infrastructure, that they can skip the preliminary subdivision plan process. Those still have to go to
So
city
that's
council.
why they're still,
That's why they still go to city
Okay.
council,
that
because
was,
they're skipping the
that was
preliminary.
essentially my question is
Yeah.
why,
Yeah, the idea is city council should make the initial decision, and then we should be substantially in compliance from that point forward. For minor subdivisions, since they don't see it up front, their one approval is actually at the end before they plat it.
okay. And then further down in that paragraph, it says the city council shall have the option of approving the final plat as presented or requiring additional information or revisions.
Yeah, there is a suggested change for that sentence. It
Yeah, because
should,
that's a little bit,
it should say for minor subdivisions,
okay,
comma,
yeah.
the city council. So if we can make that one change to the ordinance. And then I think there's another change I'd like to recommend once we get through discussing all of them, that has to deal with the easement vacations, because I think we added the word construction to the easement. But we'll get to that later after you get all your questions.
The only issue I see with this, or I'm trying to foresee, is I know that this would be on the consent agenda, and it would already, let's say the preliminary plan would be approved already, right?
Mhm. Yes,
Well,
And-
in the earlier slide, it said if they made any substantial changes,
Yeah.
right? And
If-
so what my question is how do you determine what's substantial and not substantial? What would be
Yeah.
major, what would be minor?
So-
What designates those two?
yeah, so your code already covers that in a couple of different sections, but if you were to change the location of your roadway connections, that would be considered substantial, because connectivity of the roadways would be changing. And then council would have to take a look at that and make sure that that's still compliant with the plans. The other thing is fill. So if during the construction process plans, all of a sudden you had lots that laid out adjacent to existing properties where you were saying you only had 1.5 feet of fill, and now you're going up to 5 or 6 feet, well, we need to take another look at that because that might affect buffers. So things of that nature would generate a requirement to amend the preliminary plan. There was a case where instead of doing a cul-de-sac, or instead of doing a connected roadway with like an interim fire turn, somebody wanted to do a cul-de-sac. Well, because we have requirements for connectivity, that would have to go back and be approved by council. So kind of major things that would be changed. If you got to move a lot 10 feet, but still meet your density requirements and all your lot requirements, that's minor, And once the surveyors get out there and lay out the flood plains and all that kind of stuff, if it shifts a lot or two, those are minor, as long as it doesn't impact the densities.
Yeah, and the reason I bring all this up is because, when you approve a preliminary, there's a lot of things that change or can change.
Oh, yeah, when you start surveying the property and you got to come in with your actual construction plans, you may see areas that get tweaked. There's a difference between tweaking it, shifting it a little bit, and totally redesigning it.
So adding lots or density, would that also be considered a major?
Only if it went
revision?
beyond a certain percentage. I think your code's like 10% now or something. So once you start increasing the number of lots to where you're actually going beyond what it would be an administrative approval, then you would have to come back to council.
Yeah, because as you know, some subdivisions affect the neighboring communities a lot more than others.
Yep.
And so
And
I
that's
just want to
the-
make sure that, anything major is not going to be overlooked.
Yeah.
And, that it would still have to be reviewed by city council,
Yeah.
and that public would still have a chance to weigh in on it if
So if
there
you
was
had
something major.
single-family detached lots and single-family attached lots, and all of a sudden you changed out all the single-family detached lots to attached lots and reduced the lot widths, that would be considered substantial.
And especially this helps them because now you get all of this simple stuff out of the way that it doesn't take up all that time. So whenever those situations come up, there's more opportunity and time to deal with that, so.
Right.
And like you said, the statutes are the ones that are dictating that, or the codes rather, so.
Right, and the reason you do that with the preliminary subdivision plan is because you've not really invested a whole lot at that point. So when you're doing your construction plans, you find out you've got to significantly change it, you go back and amend your preliminary, as opposed to waiting until your final plat, when council may not like some of the changes you were gonna make. And now all of a sudden, you got a construction plan package that's been approved. A lot of folks don't do bonds right now, they actually build out those improvements. And then you bring a final plat and council says, wait a minute, that's not consistent with what we approved. And then you got problems, so in a way, this process forces all that to be done with the preliminary plan.
So to be clear, could they add additional lots and units
They
to the
could,
preliminary?
you could, if you had a subdivision that's like 120 lots and you give your staff an administrative approval of 10%, you could add another 12 lots. It wouldn't be substantial enough to increase the density beyond what that zoning would allow.
But if they did increase the density beyond what the zoning would allow, then it
Oh,
would
yeah.
definitely have to go.
Well, not only would it
Back
come back for
for the
preliminary,
preliminary,
yeah, but you would probably get a recommendation of denial, because obviously, we're not going to allow it to go against what the zoning requirements are either.
Okay.
Any other questions for the city?
You think the public has any
At
questions?
this moment, we'll close the city comments and open it for public comments.
You should.
Since there's no public comments, we'll close it to the public and give yourselves the last chance to speak amongst yourselves.
There,
Would you like?
there is one change. If you go down to section 2411, and you look at where it talks about, it's under D3, where it talks about the easements. We did add construction easements to that. I don't think we had to, but I think the city attorney's office felt like construction easements is gonna be a big part of the ones that we release, because those are temporary anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
And other than that, you've got the two changes that we talked about.
I noticed that we, where it said his or he,
Yeah, we just said. or
referring to the city
designate.
manager, we
Yeah.
had to get rid of those as well.
It's amazing when you make a woman your city manager, what you find.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other big one was Department of Planning and Zoning. I mean, that name's probably changed 6 times since they wrote this initial code, so we just got rid of the name of the department that you submit the application. Yeah.
Gotta be inclusive.
Okay, well,
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, at
thank you,
this-
Dave.
At this time, if everybody's content, would we, anybody like to give a motion?
All right, well, I'm not sure what this falls under. Is this isn't really any of our categories, is it? It's an ordinance,
It's-
right?
Right, it's a, they're just seeking a motion for approval, or approval, recommendation of approval to approve the ordinance that's being
Okay.
proposed.
All right, well, then I would like to recommend approval. I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of ordinance 2024-29, the easement plat process.
With the conditions the city requested? The extra conditions?
Well, just the extra modification.
Well, just the modifications that they've made.
I have a first, do I have a second?
Second.
I have first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Passes, sir.
5-0.
Next meeting, Madam Secretary?
Next planning commission
Thank
meeting
you.
is gonna be May 21st, 2024, 6 PM.
Do we still have the one on,
Do we have the
Wednesday?
extra one?
No, that has actually been canceled,
Okay,
but I
thank you.
appreciate you guys for working that out with me.
So do I have a motion to cancel and adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Adjourned.